And so Susan, thank you for being here. Sorry about that. I got connected with you because we have a mutual friend, Pastor Brenda.
Right.
And when I was asking who knows someone who knows something about creation care and has a passion for it, and she says, you need to talk to Susan. So here you are. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and your passion for this?
Well,
Real close to the mic. Yeah, there you go.
I'm just graduating from Luther Seminary. I just turned in my last assignment on Friday. So, and I'm not going the traditional pastor route. I have a project that I want to do, and it relates to creation care and social justice, and I'm going to start shopping it around pretty soon. So it's kind of exciting.
Yeah, so your whole project and passion is about creation care, which is amazing. And my first question is, why do you think Christians should be involved in care for creation? And what does that look like?
Well, it is a spiritual concern. Creation care and social justice, like fair trade, things like that. At the core of it is when we turn God's beloved creation into objects to extract wealth from. And that includes people, but also nature becomes a resource to extract wealth from. And so that's why...
A little bit closer, yeah, there you
That's why it is primarily a spiritual concern, and why it very much concerns Christianity.
Yeah, as we saw in the Psalm and in other places in the Bible, sometimes we have these words like dominion that have given us this impression as Christians that, oh, we can do whatever we want with creation. We can use it however we want. Well, we did that for a couple thousand years, and how did that turn out for us? So another way, and when you look at the Hebrew, is actually translating it to more of stewardship and caretaking. Well, that's a completely different mindset. And so now I think Christians are trying to do a better job of realizing that we have an imperative way to take care of people. Now, we discussed, I think this is really important, it is a mindset of consumerism where things are objects for you to use, and how that can even translate to people. And changing from that mindset, which is pretty universal right now, to a mindset of collaboration and sustainability and working with, not against, creation. Any more you want to say about that?
Well, I have a Bible.
Yes.
The psalmist in Psalm 8 kind of has a human-centric view of the world. And in the book of Job, as Job talks through the earlier chapters, he also tends to view things in terms of how is it useful to him. And at the end of the book, God comes and gives Job a tour of God's creation. And God is like pointing out the wild goats and their beauty, and the wild horses, and even the behemoth, this monster, and how wonderful this monster is, and the Leviathan, and how wonderful this thing that is actually destructive to human beings and of no use to them, how wonderful it is. And so God is showing Job how God stewards God's creation. And that is in the best interests of each creature, each creation, and not to God's usefulness to God. And then a little while later, God kind of critiques Job about the Leviathan. And God says, "That great Leviathan, can you catch it with a fishhook or put a bit in its mouth? Could you tie its nose with a rope? Will it beg you for mercy or timidly ask your pardon? Would it strike a bargain with you, becoming your lifelong servant? Would you then make a pet of it and lead it around on a leash to amuse the household? Will traders bid for its hide so it can be sold in shops the world over? Mm-hmm. So this is, it's pretty clear we view creation like Job does, sorry. And we tend to view it in terms of its usefulness to us instead of the beloved creation God made it to be.
Yeah, I think of so many different points of view and how that unconsciously comes into my mind. For example, unfortunately, most of the chocolate we consume from the grocery store comes from unethical sources. The fact that some chocolate says fair trade on it means that the rest was not. That the rest was, there is possibly slave, even children labor, that was used to harvest the cocoa beans. And in a couple years ago, I think it was Nestle, was called out for still using child slave labor to harvest the cocoa beans. And their response is, Americans don't want to pay more for chocolate, so. And I thought, well, A, we don't know about this. Would we be willing to pay more if we knew? But then you think about the clothing industry as well. It feels like in so many ways we have been taught and groomed in a way to view things from a consumer's point of view. How much can I get for how little possible? And then we think it's a good deal. And we're trained to think it's a good deal. And we're trained to not think and not know about who might be suffering behind that. Sometimes it's deforestation of habitats. Sometimes animals are losing where they live. There's just so much, right? There's so much in there, and it's so tangled up, and that's one reason why when I can, I feel passionate about buying fair trade things and clothing and more local, which unfortunately is more expensive. It's frustrating because there aren't laws yet that protect creation and animals and human beings in a way that we would see how God sees the Leviathan. Yeah.
Yep. And I think...
Microphone, sorry.
Oh. And I think social justice, fair trade, and creation care, they're all intertwined because when they're harvesting, the kids are harvesting cocoa beans instead of going to school, they're also destroying the rainforest, and a host of other things all go along with this kind of practices.
You have a beautiful passage from Revelation. You wouldn't think the book of Revelation has something to say about exploitation, but it does. It does. It's like, in fact, there's this part that's like, part of the way things are going poorly is this mentality of exploitation. So you have a beautiful verse from there, too, to read.
Right. And in this, the author of Revelations is talking about the sin that people fall into, and it's because of the worship of money. So the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn because nobody is left to buy their cargoes of goods, cargoes of gold and silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen, purple silk and scarlet cloth, all the fragrant woods, ivory, bronze, iron and marble, cargoes of cinnamon and spices, incense, myrrh and frankincense, wine and olive oil, flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and carriages, and the bodies and souls of men and women.
Yeah.
So that's human sex trafficking. That's children growing up working in the fields or in factories that will never go to school. And that's just tragedy.
Yeah. So as we were talking about, what other things Christians could do, there's lots of little things we can do. We can consume less plastic. We can reuse what we have. We can work on using less chemicals on our lawn and in our life. There's a million different things. Buy less, buy more nice things that last us longer. But I think for us, what we were talking about is more important was the mentality of non-exploitation, of changing our mind and our hearts and how we view things. Instead of viewing things as, this is something that I can own, this is something I can have. Just this is coming to me now, but even the overbreeding of the little pugs, where we're just like, oh, they're so cute, let's give them a smaller nose and a smaller nose and a smaller nose, and then they can't breathe, and most of them spend their life suffering because they can't breathe, but they're so cute, right? And to me, that's just and I didn't know that. I was horrified when I found out about that. I was so sad because I don't want anything to suffer, but it's a mentality of, what do I want? What's good for me, without thinking of its impact on the creature, on the creation. And I think it's just that mentality of changing from thinking just about what can I have and use to how are we all benefiting.
And that's the nature of stewardship, is caring for others like God would care for them, and taking God's example of God's care for us, and we turn around and care for God's creation in the same way as much as we can.
Absolutely. So as we close our time together, we sort of thought, what are ways that in our lives, and even as an atonement, what are some simple things that we could do and shift that would make a difference?
I think it's throughout our days, choosing what kind of food we eat, how it's produced. Thinking about how the things, we buy, considering putting solar panels on your house or buying an electric car. There's so many different things to do. And it is expensive, and there are limits to what we can do. And so we, need to be kind to ourselves and realize, the cards are kind of stacked against us as individuals by multinational corporations. So, can't feel too bad, but just as much as you can try will make a difference.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago we had a guest here from Isaiah, and he said that when we collaborate together and ask for laws to change, that can be some of the most important things we do. And so we can do individual things where we change our mindset and the way that we operate with creation differently. But we can also ask for laws to pass to make sure that those giant corporations aren't being unethical. And that can be a powerful thing as well. I think this is a fun, ongoing conversation. If this was a different format, we would start bringing ideas forward of little things that we could do as a congregation and individually, little and big, because little makes an impact as well. It doesn't have to be huge.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of little things add up to one great big huge thing.
Yes. And I think the most important thing is changing our mind in the way we see creation as its own living, breathing thing with a right to be there, regardless of how useful it is to us, right?
Or even dangerous to us.
Oh, ooh, yes. It's a whole nother topic, isn't it? Yeah. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Susan, for being here and sharing your wisdom.
Well, thank you for having me.